Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of the X Files Miniseries Episode 3, Mulder and Scully Meet the Were-Monster. I'll have to give a spoiler warning for the episode. If you have not seen it, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So, Mulder and Scully Meet the Were-Monster is not only very obviously a Monster of the Week episode, but it's also a famed X Files comedy episode. Now, I've stated before that I'm not a huge fan of Monster of the Week episodes, and I'm even less of a fan of the comedy episodes. Many of the comedy episodes I feel are way overrated. Some of them I think are the worst of the entire series, while others will claim those same episodes are the best of the entire series. Although there are a few comedy episodes I do like Jose Chung's From Outer Space and Clyde Buckman's Final Repose, for the most part I find them a bit overrated. So, as you can imagine, I was a bit skeptical coming into this episode, as it was clear from the preview that it would not only be a Monster of the Week episode, but a comedy as well. However, some people were quite upset that they did do a standalone silly episode and thought it was a waste because it had nothing to do with the main plot. However, I wasn't the least bit surprised that they were doing that, seeing how the comedy episodes were always their most popular ones, so I kind of expected this to happen, so I just went with it. And overall, this episode wasn't too bad, and wasn't, in fact, quite funny in some places. The main issue I had with some of these comedy episodes that everyone else seems to love and I hate is that its portrayal of the characters and events are completely inconsistent with the rest of the series, and my favorite comedy episodes are the ones that are consistent with the rest of the series, which this episode is. Not only that, but I would even say that this delves even deeper into the characters of Mulder and Scully, particularly Mulder, as it explores how he's dealt with the passage of time and trying to find his place in the world at the moment. That being said, this episode was obviously really absurd, and at times I think they were trying a bit too hard to make it crystal clear that this was a comedy. It's like someone was screaming at me, "Hey, guess what? This is a comedy!" Where personally, I think the best comedies are the ones that play it straight and let the comedy speak for itself, particularly on a serious show such as the X Files. When they go really overboard with the comedy like they did in this episode, it can seem really out of place. That being said, I felt the comedy worked extremely well in this episode. The overall plot of Mulder hunting down a were-monster, which turns out to be a lizard turning into a man rather than the man turning into a lizard, and the story unfolded in a way that really fit with Mulder's overall character arc. The ending where he got to shake the lizard's hand and how that made him a true believer after he was having doubts at the start of the episode was a very nice character arc. Plus, all the jokes just worked, from the wacky man who turned out to be a lizard, to the peeping Tom motel owner, to the eccentric psychologist. It was all funny and all worked well. Now, the plot of the lizard monster getting bit by a man and suddenly having the urge to go into town and get a job to pay his mortgages is obviously really absurd and implausible. But it's also obvious it's meant to be satire on how crazy our way of life is and how it might be viewed by outsiders. So I do appreciate that part of it, but it was just a bit too absurd for me. However, from the very beginning, when the Huffers saw the monster in the forest and he just ran right past them, I knew from the way it was shot that the monster wasn't the villain, and people would just misinterpret him as a monster when really it's just an innocent little lizard creature. So that part wasn't surprising at all. But, that didn't really necessarily detract from the episode because that wasn't the main point of it. So my rating for Mulder and Scully Meet the Were-Monster is a 7, very good. This was a funny and well put together satire that flowed quite nicely and was well constructed and helped add to Mulder's character and explore where he is now after all this time. But it's a bit too absurd at times and a bit too hard to swallow, and sometimes the comedy is way too obvious, and it felt like they were trying a bit too hard to make a comedy episode, but overall, I do think it really worked, and it was a nice, funny episode. So that's it for my review of Mulder and Scully Meet the Weremonster. Be sure to check back here every week as I review the remaining episodes of the X Files miniseries, and make sure you subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.